It's time for Forward Nation Radio. Now here he is, the host of Forward Nation Radio, David Leventhal.
On the 4-year anniversary of the killing of Eric Garner by a New York City police officer who was out of control, and then subsequent cover-up of that possible crime, the New York City just announced that it will be beginning administrative disciplinary proceedings against the police officer, as a way to goad the federal government, where it turns out the Department of Justice has been weighing for 4 years whether or not they are going to bring civil rights charges against the officer. 4 years? Gee, what's with these federal investigations that they take so long to be completed? I guess investigating the murder of an unarmed civilian that was captured on cell phone camera is much, much, much more complicated than the Mueller investigation, for instance. Welcome to Forward Nation Radio with me, David Leventhal, and our new sidekick, Damian Hardeen, our producer. Thank you for joining us as always.
Hey, everyone.
In today's show, of course, whatever else we might have had planned throughout the week, none of that really matters because Mr. Bean has gone to Europe. And I guess there to make America great. But he must have forgotten to wear his MAGA hat or something, because you can't, I guess, turn on any media at this point in time, fortunately, without reading or hearing about how the President of the United States has absolutely disgraced himself and his country.
But, you know, the folks in other parts of the world see right through this stuff, which is very interesting because nowhere else can you see a U.S. president being flown as, what, a 20-foot, 40-foot baby in diapers above London, which, I mean, that's got to be great commentary. Are those social commentary? Are those guys falling for the fake news as well? I mean, this is the rationale that, as a Trump supporter, once it goes outside of the United States, you would imagine they'd really have to think, what's happening? Because if he's supposed to be that great, why isn't it that the rest of the world doesn't like him?
Well, you know, they have propaganda in much of the rest of the world too, but of course they don't have the same propaganda. Now, I can make a comment about, well, what's the matter? I was going to make a joke. They don't have Fox News in London. But of course, they do have Fox News in London.
I think you have to try harder with your propaganda in other places. It just seems to be really easy.
The propaganda is just aimed at different things. In London, they're lying. Rupert Murdoch and his properties are lying about Brexit. That's where the focus is. In America, they're lying about things that most affect Americans. So I would say that perhaps on an issue like Brexit, informed Americans may be better informed than many Brits.
But yet, they seem to be keenly aware of what's going on with Trump. And, you know, it's still, when it's this obvious, Brexit is a little bit more complex. Having a guy come to the podium as the President of the United States and say incoherent messages, I mean, there's no nuance there. You get to see exactly what this guy's all about. You get to hear him rip on May. You get to hear him rip on all of our allies. A 6-year-old can figure it out.
I think that point we've agreed on is undeniable. That this keeps getting more and more so. Well, people have described the Putin meeting, which we're about to get into, as surreal. And I read that and I think, doesn't that pretty much describe the entirety of the last year and a half in America?
I would love to know what our
surreal.
Listeners would describe that meeting as. If you're a listener and you want to go ahead and you want to chime in on our Facebook page or anything like that, let us know how you would describe this meeting that just took place, because, yeah, we're going to get into it.
There's not even a whole lot of disagreement. It's being described that way by Republicans. It's being described, of course, mostly it's being described by the the Republicans who are retiring, like Bob Corker, who described the President of the United States as a pushover, I guess, get the new hats. Make America a pushover again. MAPA hats. That's, I guess, putting America first. John McCain, who I guess in Republican circles doesn't really matter because he's dying anyway, has referred to the President of the United States having abased himself in unsurpassed ways and having disgraced the United States of America.
It's a genuine WTF moment. I mean, the words that folks are using to describe this, they're doing their level best to come up with something that's accurate. And because it's unprecedented, there's every description hits upon how outrageous this meeting was and what Trump said, and even going back to how he interacted with the Queen, kept her waiting for 10 minutes for tea. I mean, who does that? And he's a businessman. Every business person I've worked for, if you kept your boss waiting for 10 minutes, they might not say anything about it, but I mean, it really shows poorly on you, and it's incredible.
Competent business people who've been held to some kind of standard of responsibility, which one will argue does not describe Donald Trump or his business career, understand the concept of protocol, right? Understand the concept of not stepping on people's toes, doing things that's inappropriate when you walk into a meeting.
Or racing ahead of the Queens.
Or racing ahead of the Queen.
to greet the guards. Yeah.
I think, one thing that's come out of this, that picture, I'm sure you've seen the picture from the NATO meeting with everybody looking in one direction, but Trump looking in the opposite direction. What a just remarkable metaphor for the Trump administration.
Absolutely.
Whatever direction, at least the westernized, democratic, industrialized, thoughtful, educated world going in one direction, and the President of the United States apparently looking for his friends from Russia and North Korea and the Philippines at this point, looking in the exact opposite direction. This has been, every week we're at the point where we say it can't get worse, and it manages to get worse. This is ridiculous. This is at a point where, remarkably, some GOP leaders have now come out and very cautiously disagreed to some extent, usually without using Trump's name or anything, not making it direct, but kind of disagreed. Now, of course, have any of them actually come out to try to undermine what the president is doing here? No, but at least maybe there's some improvement that at least they're talking some game here.
And the
where
thing
they don't
is,
even do that normally.
With this being as blatant as it is, and just to be clear, we are talking about words that are linked to treason. The word treason's been up in media, and I don't think that it's been unfairly used. If anything, it's encouraging to see that the word is now in direct correlation, because when you take a hostile foreign powers leader who has acted against us, when you take his word for it over what we get back from our own intel, every single one of them, and that's also including the intel that's shared throughout the world, this is treasonous.
It's funny because several weeks ago, someone, I think one of our former intelligence chiefs, had referred to Trump as being a possible traitor or treasonous behavior. And there was a big backlash, even among much of the so-called liberal media, where it was pointed out that you're undermining your case when you use a word like treason. It turns out that in the United States, the term treason is defined remarkably narrowly. Now, of course, I think at one point on the show several weeks ago, I think I briefly addressed this, and I took issue somewhat with that, which is to say, when people use the word treason in America, they're not necessarily using the legal definition. As Justice Potter, I believe, it famously said in the United States Supreme Court on pornography, we may not be able to accurately define it, but I know it when I see it. You can see why that was famous, that it was referring to pornography. We know it when we see it. And I think for most Americans, to hell with what the legal definition is, when we see treason, we kind of know what treason is. And just a few weeks ago, there was all this caution. Do not use the word treason. Do not use the word treason. It just ruins your credibility because it's not really treason. And now you're seeing institutional figures throwing around the word treason because it may even meet the technical definition of treason now.
Right. And you have to be careful to use the right words when it comes to something like this. Something can be treasonous without being treason. I know it sounds like a little bit of something where you're splitting hairs, but you can act in a way that could be harmful without it being harmful. But here's a definition of treason, and it's even different as it's described in our Constitution. So we've got the crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill the sovereign or overthrow the government. Now, if you're making all of these moves at the behest of a hostile foreign power, that fits this description to a T. So don't shy away from the word. If anything, I think it's something that if the patterns and if the actions fit this, then you have to use the appropriate word.
Well, would you call taking the word of a hostile foreign rival? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, not a rival, a competitor. More, I'll explain that in a few moments. But would you call taking the word of a hostile foreign rival who interfered in a U.S. election over the word of U.S. intelligence agencies, U.S. news sources, your own hand-picked national security advisors, would you call that undermining the United States for the sake of a hostile foreign power?
I think it's good evidence in that direction. It's a great question because that alone I don't think constitutes treason, but given everything else, I mean, we're talking about back channels, we're talking about actual acts that have undermined the U.S. general election, possibly even the primaries as well, as some stories came out recently that mentioned that, and we'll get into this later, that even as early as 2015, that there were efforts that were going to promote Trump as likely the next president. And how would they know at that point? But I'm talking about somebody that was arrested. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, well, these are obviously ridiculously serious issues at this point. This is the Manchurian Candidate, only he's actually wearing a Soviet Union T-shirt or something. We were talking earlier, Thomas Friedman in his column today uses the word treason and points out, I think properly, that Trump, at this point, Trump's greatest defense is it is so obvious at this point that this man has no interest in putting the interests of the United States of America first, that if you really were a criminal, you wouldn't be that obvious about it. This is sort of his defense at this point. But as Friedman pointed out, and we were talking about earlier, the indictment that was just announced yesterday of a spot with Butina.
Yeah, Maria Butina. Actually, she was arrested and is being held without bond, without bail. So yeah, Maria Butina.
Pre-indictment. That they basically said that she pretty much has been open about being a Soviet spy. So maybe that argument even goes out the window. But this is serious enough that I got to tell you, we need to get to the bottom of this. And the most uplifting thing that came out of Trump's meeting with Putin is that Putin offered to actually take over the investigation of Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election, for which Trump praised him.
Unbelievable.
I wonder if the Central Park Five, they had offered to take over the prosecution of the Central Park Five if Trump would have been supportive of that as well.
Yeah.
Trump called it an incredible offer. Incredible offer. Because, of course, in Trump land, everything is wonderful, incredible, the best. unbelievable. Trump uses superlatives like my 4-year-old son uses the word poop. Pretty much all the time.
And just so everybody's aware of what this means, the offer by Putin was to have Mueller and his team. Now, remember, Putin's somebody who's been known to have his detractors killed. Any negative, some negative journalism that comes out, well, he'll find those guys, and some of those guys end up dead. His offer is to have Mueller and his team go over to Russia, where, hey, nothing's going to happen, but we're going to go ahead and have our guys also infiltrate any sort of research, this investigation that you're doing, and that's supposed to fly in the faces of somebody who's using their brain. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious in this. In this life, it doesn't get more obvious than how ridiculous this whole thing is at this point.
It is remarkable. I see how brazen it is. The contempt. You go back to the good old days. Do you remember do you remember the good old days when Barack Obama was accused by the right of being unpatriotic? I guess this is Patriotism Month in America. It is still the month of July. How Obama was accused of being unpatriotic because of the way he saluted at one point while going somewhere. I think he had his cup of coffee in his hand, and he saluted, and the right went ballistic. Oh, to the good old days when it was holding a coffee cup that gave the opposite side reason to question your patriotism. Here, Donald Trump meets again in secret with Vladimir Putin. And what's with all the secret?
I was thinking the same thing.
Is there like peeing going on or something? Is that what's going on at these meetings? Putin. We should also be a little bit curious that Trump likes to have a lot of secret meetings with the Russians. He and Putin met in secret with only 2 interpreters, who I assume have been killed since then to keep them quiet.
Buried and glaciated.
Yeah. Buried in glacial ice, along with the particle of physics, the ghost particle that I think was finally isolated in deep in kilometers worth of ice. But we're not going to go into that right now and change the subject. But there is other news still happening.
It's such an interesting point, though. Like, why do all of this as a secret meeting? And notice there are no details that came out about this. They're all generalizations. Even today, where Trump found himself talking back or trying to take back what he said at that conference, because, and let's be clear about this, the only reason why he's doing this, Trump, he does not backpedal on anything. The only reason why he's doing it is because it's been such harsh criticism that now he has to say, well, yeah, I chose the wrong words, but it shouldn't mean anything to anybody, because when you let somebody just navigate and maneuver in such a fashion, it's like saying, yeah, do as many wrong things as you want to, but if you come out and say the right thing later on, oh, it's okay, everything is good. But yeah, why all the secrecy? So what do you think happened there?
I assume they probably discussed Hillary Clinton and her emails and how awful that is, which of course Trump did talk about afterwards.
Did you see that deflection? Had nothing to do with the reporter's question. It was just let's move right. And that's the get out of jail free card. A lot of folks on the left have this joke. It's a meme actually, where you can find these Monopoly type of cards. They're memes that has a Monopoly guy, and it's the deflect and bring up Hillary or Obama whenever something's going wrong with Trump. And that's exactly what he did.
One has to ask how long this is going to work.
What are you doing in my swamp?
I don't know. Maybe they're talking about it right now on Fox News about Hillary's emails. So anyway, we've touched upon a lot of things that came out of the meeting, and we assume that most or all of our listeners have at this point the basics of what happened. But just to elaborate, I had mentioned before as kind of a joke that it was reported that Trump had referred to Putin as a rival, and doesn't seem particularly problematic, except it was to Trump. And that was one of the few things that he went and backtracked on. And they said, well, at least he said fake news. What he actually said was he was a competitor, and that was supposed to be flattering. That was a really good thing. But of course, Trump said that Putin had offered to investigate the hacking of the U.S. presidential election, and Trump thought that was a great idea.
Oh, please.
Bear in mind this whole thing. Trump, no criticism of Putin, only nice things. And while this is going on, basically, the ink is still drying on the indictment of 12 Russian intelligence agencies.
Nothing to see here.
By the special counsel.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. And so does Trump bring up extradition in his meeting with Putin? We didn't hear anything about that. I assume they'll decide what plays well, and then maybe later on Trump will say, oh, yeah, I brought that up with him in our secret meeting. Did he talk? Did the President of the United States show up to the leader of Russia and say, a guy who has hacked a U.S. election, and say, this will not stand. This is not acceptable. This is putting America first. This is making America great again. He is making America an absolute tool. He is making America a pushover.
And that's not putting it lightly. This is exactly what this meeting accomplished.
So how are his supporters, we keep raising this issue and we're not going to answer it now, but you still have to ask, how are his supporters still squaring this circle?
Well, like this. You bring up emails to deflect from what's going on, but then you also say, hey, the economy. It's okay that we sell out to the Russians because, hey, the economy, which, by the way, he's taking total credit for off of things that were instituted under the previous administration. But this is how they get by with a lot of this stuff. They go ahead and bring up the economy, like the economy is more important than the sovereignty of the nation.
Well, that's a great analogy. I mean, it turns out it's analogous to something that happened at his meeting with Putin, where Trump, of course, has said that relations with Russia have never been worse, and basically blaming it on the United States, not on, we've talked a lot on this show about different reasoning fallacies, and we've talked a lot, particularly about the false equivalence, which is being used all the time. To equate two things that really are completely not equivalent. The United States certainly has plenty of things to answer for in its history. None of those presumably things that actually bother the current president of the United States. But to equate what's going on in our relationship, to equate the United States' actions against Russia over the last couple of years with what Russia has done with our election and otherwise, what Russia has done in Ukraine, what Russia has done in Crimea, what Russia has done in Great Britain, both not only were they affecting votes in the United States of America, they clearly impacted the Brexit vote, and the Brexit vote may have gone the way it did because of Russian interference in that election.
And elections
but the
France.
murder, I mean, they're trying to murder Russian citizens and ending up killing a British citizen in Great Britain. None of these things equate with anything that America's done. Sorry, Damien, what was it?
Oh, I was going to also mention, for good measure, they're trying to affect the elections in France between Macron and Le Pen. And that didn't work, and the reason why it's reported that it didn't work is because people didn't fall for it. So what's with our guys here? Come on, guys. Reach out to somebody that you know. Reach out to your friend. Reach out to your relative and say,
step up our game.
What? Yeah.
Couldn't you at least be France?
Now you don't have to take arms to defend a nation. You can go ahead and reach out through social media and push back a little bit for the things that we enjoy here, mainly our freedoms. Just push back. Even in a clever, minute way, do your part.
You know what? So, but if people just keep buying hook, line, and sinker, going back to finish the point that I forgot to finish a few moments ago, that Trump says, just like the economy's awful, the economy's awful, the economy's awful. And when did the economy turn around? As soon as Trump became the president, and they took credit for the exact same numbers that he was delegitimizing under Obama. Well, the same thing he did with Russia, which often gets overlooked. Recent relations with Russia have never been worse, but then he added, that changed about 4 hours ago.
Yeah.
So immediately I have fixed our Russia relationship problems just by being here.
Must
and
have had
meeting
it over
with Vlad.
Must have had it over a cheeseburger. A cheeseburger could fix so much, I think. I just might be hungry. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be the cheeseburger. Personally, I think it was urine. But they got up, they peed on each other. Things were good.
Hey, rich guys like weird
The
things.
question was who had to leave the money on the night table or something. I don't know.
I don't think that there's any way that Putin would have let himself pay for that. That was totally Trump's thing, and he was gushing. Did you see that at the meeting after the secret meeting? It's like Trump will attack everybody else. He'll purse his lips, and then he'll speak in his. And, I can't do a Trump accent. You do a better Trump accent, but he'll speak in this voice that's
something.
bombastic. Yeah. but what happens is that next to Putin, he's completely enamored. It's like he just came home to his daddy. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, if you look at the body language and his tone, he's completely submissive. An American president is completely submissive to a hostile foreign power, and he's doing nothing to prepare us for attacks for the 2018 votes, which is why I think personally we need paper ballots in 2018.
I think that making America push over, abasing us, disgracing the country, frankly, having a pathetic representation of our country against a foreign power, raising him up dramatically, internationally, domestically, whatever, in his standing, raising Putin much higher than he should be. These are all incontrovertible. What comes from that? Whether he is supplicant, whether this is, you sort of feel like we jumped the gun a little bit last week when we talked about how much evidence is accumulating about how Putin clearly has something on Donald Trump. And more people are saying this in the media now. We sort of feel like we jumped the gun by a week because, boy, there's been a lot of evidence out there for months that the President of the United States is submissive to Putin for whatever reason. But boy, after this past week, it's just, it's so much worse. It's like when I wanted to ask Gail Collins if she jumped the gun a little bit when she named Scott Pruitt the worst of the Trump administration, even before so much of the bad stuff came out about Scott Pruitt. It's like now it's much worse. You want to have that in your back pocket. Well, it's just getting more and more obvious. Now, we bend over backwards to be fair on the show and not get ahead of the story. And there are people arguing that Donald Trump won't call out any ruthless, brutal dictator around the world. He doesn't say anything about Duterte. He doesn't say anything about the leaders of Saudi Arabia. He doesn't say anything, and I'm going to get some pushback on this one, about Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. And so Glenn Greenwald, for instance, who I like and respect, says let's not jump to the conclusion that Putin has something over Trump other than that Trump has dictator envy. But those relationships are not nearly the same. And it's really getting harder and harder to imagine any scenario in this that doesn't have the President of the United States trying to hide something with the necessary assistance of his good buddy across the ocean.
Yeah, and speaking of hiding stuff, I mean, we touched upon this earlier, but with the arrest of Maria Butina, who, as the New York Times headline says, quote, Maria Butina, who sought back channel meeting for Trump and Putin, is charged as a Russian agent. Now, the thing with Maria Butina is that she has also said, as it came out, that a lot of Trump's appointees weren't selected by Trump. See, this is where the word treason comes right back into the fold, because when you have, if this proves to be true, when you have a situation where another country is choosing your nominations for cabinet and for office, that's an issue.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
Also, let's not forget about this before we leave. The timing of the timing of what this Butina is being accused of and much of the latest information, maybe it's just coincidence, but the day that Trump stands up and says, Russia, where are those 30,000 emails? Help us out here. That's the very day that a lot of this was going on, that Russia basically responded.
Do you know that when I first heard him say that, I watched it live, I stood up out of my chair and I said, who the hell would say something like that? This is just, you just don't hear that. This is just a blatantly un-American thing to say, to invite another country to hack. Even your adversary was just outrageous. And I was so surprised that it didn't pick up even more attention through the news. But now we're talking about it because it happens to have that coincidence, which we may or may not know if that is an actual coincidence.
It is shocking. You alluded to this a little while ago. Republicans, where are you? I mean, where are Republican supporters at this point? People are pointing out, and we're going to point out at this point in time, if this were Barack Obama, again, he saluted with a cup of coffee in his hands, and they were ready to impeach the guy for not being sufficiently patriotic. Where is the Republican base? If this had been Barack Obama, they would be calling for his execution. If it were Hillary Clinton, they were saying throw her in prison. They're still saying throw her in prison for using a private email server.
Yeah, that kind of stupid.
How does anybody square this other than such naked partisanship, such divisiveness in this country that nothing matters? Facts don't matter. Consistency of your arguments, your beliefs, completely irrelevant. I guess Republican base have joined their leaders. The only thing that matters is winning.
And I have to laugh when I say this because not that many people know. And this is to the power of the machinery. We spoke about this last week. The machinery of right-wing media. Not that many people know that Hillary Clinton's not the first person to use a private server. This has been done many, many times. Google it.
And as we've pointed out, she's not the last, since several people in the Trump administration, including the president, has done it.
Absolutely right. but if you find one thing that a body of people are willing to say, yeah, okay, that makes sense, but only because you've said it over and over and over again, then it becomes outrageous. But yet, she's not the first person to do it. Many other administrations has. And just to give you the context of this, it's like if something's always been done, let's say you go to a new job or any job, and something's always been done in a particular way, and you're doing it pretty much the same way, whether it might be to code or not, or policy or not, to say, just because it serves your political purposes, aha, we caught you doing this. And in our book, that's not supposed to be done. Never mind everybody else that's done it. And then you make that a thing. And it's one of the only two talking points that have stuck against Hillary Clinton. They had over 20 years to think of something. Think about this. Trump is in power for, I guess we've been hearing about him for about 2 years, a little bit more now in a political sense. They've had 20 years to talk about Hillary Clinton, and they could find only two things. Both were investigated, and nothing turned up.
And both were investigated, let's be clear, by congressional committees and current congressmen putting way more hours into the investigation than they're willing to put into the investigation of Russia interfering with a U.S. election and possibly holding the marionette strings over the president of the United States. And boy, what another statement about where we are in this country, where one political party thinks the only thing that matters is winning, that there's no consistency, there's no values. You throw it out there because you think it's going to work, not because you actually believe it. I mean, how clear could this be? The Trump supporters will keep doubling down because they think that people like me think so little of them and condescend to them and say bad things about them and whatever else. And the biggest tragedy here is that the people with the most contempt for Trump supporters are Trump and the Trump people and the right and the Republicans, who treat these people as the absolute tools that they know that they are, and have no respect for them when it comes to facts, legitimate argument, or anything else. They know they could throw out whatever piece of shit they want to throw out that will somehow stick, and it will stick, and they know that. And the problem that the left has always had, including Hillary Clinton, they could say what they want about her condescending to Trump voters. They could say what they want about her basket full of deplorables comment. But Hillary Clinton's biggest mistake to Trump supporters is the biggest mistake that liberals always make to Trump supporters in their ilk. We treat them with respect and decency, and we try to make reasonable arguments to them, and we don't just lie to them with bumper stickers. And that's so much more effective. And the Republicans have learned that that's exactly what you do. If it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, then it just doesn't matter. You know, before we're way over, and I know you want to finish this. Before he ended up meeting with his boss, of course, he met with the Western democracies, NATO. That's where he got to refer to the European Union as a foe, just to make it clear where his allegiances are. It's not with the Western democracies. I guess while he was there, two things happened at home. One, the United States tried to torpedo a UN resolution against hate speech, basically taking white supremacy worldwide. And maybe more importantly, to give you an idea where we are, the United States was undercutting the UN's effort to put out a message, a strong statement based upon overwhelming scientific research and consensus in support of breastfeeding. And the United States was the lone power undermining that. Why? Because we're getting money from formula manufacturers. Because the President of the United States and the Republican Party is taking millions of dollars from formula makers in order to harm children. So this idea of taking children as hostages along the border with Mexico, this isn't anything new. The Republican Party is used to taking children hostage. You know, captives, like Germany is the captive of Russia because they buy some of their gas, much of their gas, from Russia. That was our president, of course, turning the tables on Germany and Russia. Time's up. I guess time's up. As always, lots more to talk about, which we will share with you in upcoming weeks. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We hope you joined us on Spotify and on iTunes. If not, please do in the future. Listen to us on Podbean. Visit our website. Please like us on Facebook, on YouTube. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help spread the word, Forward Nation Radio. Thanks, as always, for listening, and we hope that somehow you have a good week. See you in a week.
You've been listening to Forward Nation Radio with David Leventhal.